Are you a game changer, rule breaker, or just interested in the latest tech? If so, don't miss the largest gathering of tech and cyber pioneers the North has ever seen. DTX Manchester is returning to Manchester Central on the 2nd and 3rd of April, bringing you the very best tech solutions from local and global providers and helping you stay at the cutting edge and solving tomorrow's problems today. As part of Manchester's Tech Week, DTX Manchester is definitely not one to miss, powering the Northern Tech Revolution. This is the Secure CyberConnect podcast with Jay Adamson and Warren Atkinson, where we're joined by information and cybersecurity, technology and talent acquisition professionals who share their journeys, unique perspectives and offer advice and guidance. Our topics on this episode are with the highly important topic of mental health in the workplace. Today we're delighted to be joined by both Jonathan Marnoch from Jaguar Land Rover and Sarah Williamson. Jonathan has worked across IT sectors for over 25 years now since leaving college. He started work straight after for Sun Microsystems, originally working as a Unix administrator, specialising in LDAP and identity, before progressing into the role of solutions architect and onto security architect. He's worked for some of the world's most prestigious companies within retail, banking, telco, the government, and of course, more recently, automotive, where he currently works as principal security architect. Working hard to promote an inclusive workforce and act as an active force in bettering people's mental health. Jonathan's a true believer in DE&I and understands fully that we're all here to deliver as a team and to draw out and celebrate everyone's individual strengths. One thing Jonathan has always been incredibly brave and open about is his own personal battles with mental health, addiction and impulsivity, which sadly resulted in an attempt at him trying to take his own life in 2020. Diagnosed 3 years ago with ADHD, a welcome diagnosis which enabled him to see things much more clearly and subsequently take the incredibly important decision to talk openly and honestly about his own struggles with autism and the ADHD diagnosis and the episodes that led up to it. Jonathan hopes that some of his story and his views will resonate with many similar people out there that are struggling and fighting their own battles. Sarah is currently Operational Manager for the Mental Health Services at Renfrewshire Health and Social Care Partnership. Qualified social worker since 2011 and a mental health officer since 2016, Sarah has spent the past 4 years in management roles, leading teams dedicated to supporting individuals with mental health needs. Throughout her career, Sarah has worked with adults living in the community who require additional support and care, and has specialised in working with individuals experiencing severe and enduring mental health disorders. Over the last few years, while maintaining a focus on the community she serves, her role has evolved to centre more on supporting her staff, recognising that without their dedication, service delivery would not be possible. As an experienced manager, she prioritises mental health, well-being and resilience of her teams, and in addition, she is dedicated to building suicide-safer communities. Sarah is also a trainer with Living Works, a global organisation that provides evidence-based training on suicide awareness and interventions, equipping people with the skills to have meaningful conversations with individuals who may be experiencing thoughts of suicide. She's passionate about raising awareness around mental health and has a particular focus on suicide awareness, stress management and supporting colleagues through difficult times. Jonathan, Sarah, a very warm welcome to the Secure CyberConnect podcast and thank you for joining us today.
Sarah, Jonathan, myself and Jim, really looking forward to the session. So Sarah, firstly, could you give us a high-level overview, very briefly, of what we're going to be discussing today, followed by yourself, please, Jonathan?
Yeah, certainly. Thank you very much. First of all, thank you so much for having me along today here because I'm so passionate about mental health and particularly in high-stress industries. Obviously, my own background's in health and social care, but cybersecurity as well, it's extremely high-stress industry. So for me, today we're looking to discuss the importance of worker wellbeing in cybersecurity and the unique mental health challenges that are faced in this field, and also how organisations can better support their staff. And certainly from my background, I'll be touching on suicide awareness, which is often overlooked but is a critically important issue that we need to bring into the conversation.
Appreciate you sharing. And yourself, Jonathan?
Thank you. Afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much, firstly, for inviting me along to take part in this open and honest heartfelt chat, discussion, important discussion about something that's so personally and professionally important to me. I look forward to getting Sarah's insight from a medical and social background. And also, I look forward to putting forward what's worked for me and also how things are in cybersecurity with burnout and the ever-evolving landscape within cyber and the pressures that we're currently under to support.
Now, looking forward to unpacking it. It's certainly going to be an episode that's going to resonate with many in the industry. And before we get into that, Sarah, if you don't mind, would you perhaps share with us something that you're either proud of, excited about, or you want to shine a light upon that isn't on your LinkedIn?
Yes, I'd love to. So, I mean, I think for me, I really want to highlight the importance within leadership roles and mental health. And it's not something that, whilst I've been in a leadership role now for a couple of years, that particularly highlighted on my LinkedIn, for example. You know, many companies believe that having employee assistance programs, for example, is enough. But for me, it's definitely about widening that conversation around the culture and the leadership role within that. You know, needing to really set that tone by opening up discussions around mental health and also modelling work-life balance, I think is so critically important, and really ensuring that psychological safety in the workplace. So for me, being able to come on to an industry that really I feel like I've got no remit to be close to, but actually through discussions, realising that the people in your industry and my industry are facing a lot of similar challenges around workload, stress, personal challenges with the global, context that we're all living through. So for me, it's being able to really shine a light on the importance of the role in leadership in organisations around that. Thank you.
That's brilliant. And yourself, Jonathan?
Yeah, so obviously having my ADHD diagnosis, my LinkedIn, as many people might see when they go looking for me, is very out of date, and I apologise profusely to everyone that's had a look at that. It's very much like my paperwork, but I would like to say championing this, being very much proactive and a champion for mental health awareness and also suicide prevention. It's something very close to my heart. Obviously, I don't advertise, about the struggles I went through in 2020 and how I nearly unalived myself. So, to be honest with you, just to get out there and to talk openly and honestly about it. Sometimes it's quite emotional. Sometimes I do get quite upset because I feel I'm lucky to still be with us. But if I can spread that word and resonate with at least one person with what they're going through and let them know that it's okay not to be okay, and that talking about it does actually help, and being honest and facing up to it, then that's what I love to do, and that's why I'm here today. So very much that, indeed.
And look, in terms of supporting, and supportive working environments, creating a supportive work environment and fostering a culture where mental health is prioritised, and in terms of promoting healthy and open communication, around topics such as stress and burnout, other mental health concerns. This is now clearly being much more widely recognised by many organisations as absolutely pivotal in the workplace. In terms of recognising the signs of distress and understanding the impact of mental health struggles with their employees, and along with knowing when to intervene, how do organisations firstly identify and deal with this in a sensitive, constructive and sensible way, and what's the best approach? And Jonathan, and if you could answer, then maybe Sarah, in that order, please.
Yeah, so I can only talk from what seems to work, and right now, at JLR, we're very open and honest about it. It's from the top down. It has to be a top-down led approach with regards to mental health and mental wealth, and also how we take care of ourselves. And there is the guidelines to follow, which I'm sure Sarah will elaborate more on what is the right thing to do. But speaking from somebody that works in that area that has suffered from mental health issues, it's like having an open, honest and open door policy, saying it's okay to not be okay, to give that time back, to not make it a big thing. Where if somebody is struggling, that they take the afternoon off, they take a few hours off to walk away from their computer. To know that they're supported, to know that whether it be internal to work or external to work, they have somebody that they can speak to, and also what the businesses offer, in ways of support, whether that be counselling, which I've used quite openly at JLR, or whether it's special mental health days.
Yeah, certainly just to echo a lot of what Jonathan said there. I think for me, first of all, employers need to understand, and I suppose start from the point of realizing that poor mental health will exist in your workplace. That's the starting point for this, because ultimately it's 1 in 3 people will have some point in their life have a poor mental health episode or period. So even if you have a workforce of 3 people, then the statistics are that one of those people are likely to have difficulties with their mental health at some point. So I think a really good starting point for employers is recognizing that it does exist, and therefore seeing it you should assume that it's there and then look for signs and symptoms, and knowing when to intervene would come after that. And it's not even just a human sort of issue. Even if you look at it from in terms of the private sector, there's a kind of rough average. 2022, there was review done. It was the Centre for Mental Health, and they estimated that in England alone, up to 41 billion pounds of revenue was lost with what's called presenteeism. So that's when workers are arriving at work not fully fit and well to do their job, but still turning up. And that's obviously the cohort of people we're talking about. It's people that are turning up at their work, they're doing their best, but businesses are losing revenue by not supporting these people. So I think it's important for businesses to recognise that, obviously, as human beings, I would hope that people would want to support their employees as, just human to human, but there is a larger economical value in supporting your workforce to be as mentally well as they can be. In terms of, obviously, the question around recognising signs and knowing when to intervene and how to do that sensitively, mental health struggles will often manifest in changes in behaviour, performance and engagement. So things like increased absenteeism from work, maybe someone who usually is very good at timekeeping suddenly are running late for meetings, late to work, or you're finding that someone who previously was able to manage their work within their working hours is suddenly staying later at work. It's an indicator that possibly they're struggling throughout the day. Decrease in productivity in staff, frequent mistakes, withdrawal from colleagues, avoiding meetings, avoiding possibly social interactions. So someone, again, that would normally go out for after work drinks on a Friday suddenly no longer wishes to do that. Mood changes in staff, irritability, people seeming overwhelmed, and also physical health. So again, actually in reviews done of individuals who unfortunately have suicided, there's actually a recognised link between those individuals approaching either their GP or A&E for a physical health issue 6 months prior to their suicide. So again, indicators like frequent headaches, stomach upsets, or that kind of no really clear cause, but low level pain, physical pain, can all be signs that someone actually is struggling mentally. And for me, managers, first of all, they should be trained to notice these early indicators, not to diagnose people, but certainly to use it as an opening to a conversation, whether that's in a one-to-one or some sort of supervisory role, and making sure that that conversation is done in a way that's supportive. So you usually are really good at turning up to meetings on time. I've noticed that you've kind of missed a few meetings, or you're running a wee bit late. Is everything all right? What's going on? And it's making sure you're kind of coming at that in a supportive way. But there's certainly many other signs that someone may be struggling, but that's just a kind of few examples of what certainly from a sort of employer-employee relationship maybe would be indicators that someone's not doing so well.
You've talked about, obviously, you've touched on there how important the roles of leadership in HR and line management are within this space. Is there sort of, initiatives, such as, the internal mental health friendly policies, that you could talk about a bit more, and maybe creating a safer and secure environment?
Yeah, certainly. So I think the mental health policies are great and they are an absolute starting point for organisations, but we have to use them. We have to make sure that organisations are using them, and it's not enough just to have one there. So normalising mental health conversations through leadership messages, as well as the policies, team discussions. So for example, in my team, staff wellbeing is a standing agenda item on all their team meetings, and it's also an individual agenda item on any supervision. So that would be our equivalent of a sort of one-to-one in the private sector. That's a standing item. So it's not just, if you happen to be struggling, let me know. It's how are you? And that is asked every single time. And also certainly encouraging leaders to share their own experiences. So like Jonathan is doing within his own sector, because that in itself is a great way to break down the stigma, for people to see someone who's in, a high power position, a leadership position, to say, actually, I've struggled with this, or I've felt that way. It gives people comfort, because they think, well, they felt the way I feel and they're still in this position, and normalising that really breaks down a lot of that stigma. You can go further than that, obviously, and offer things like training to managers for mental health first aid. But I think just lots of regular compassionate check-ins is the real key, making sure the managers are aware that policy exists, and what actually do they do if someone does come to them and say, I'm struggling with this. And a wee bit of what Jonathan's mentioned, like that flexible support. So, do you need a few hours off? And, not necessarily that, I certainly allow my staff to have mental health days if they're really struggling, and we don't put it down as a sickness absence or anything like that. It's important to have a wee bit of flexibility. And I know some people will immediately think, well, staff will just abuse that. But, in the years that I've done this, I've never had a staff member suddenly take every Monday off as a mental health day, so it's certainly not, it's actually probably not used even as frequently as I would like some of my staff to use it, despite, encouraging them to have that without it affecting their sickness absence rates, because that's obviously a real concern for people. So yeah, that would be my starter for 10 on that question.
Just to side on that, and some of the other things that we roll out as well is a buddy system within the working environment. So it doesn't necessarily have to be anyone within your team. It's just somebody that you resonate with, that you tend to get on better. Just because you work in the same team doesn't mean that everyone's your friend. You get along, the work colleagues primarily, but if you find someone within the workspace, within your working environment, we have that buddy system, and it allows that open communication. As Sarah said, there's a difference between one-to-ones and check-ins within JLR, for example. A check-in is not about the work. It is about how are you, what is going on, what do you need, what can we do to make things better, how's home, how's your kids, how's your ex-wife, how is life going for you, and is there anything you need? And again, hopefully sharing, being honest and open about things, and recognizing the stress factors, and saying, we understand that you're under a stressful time, and what can we do to assist you?
Yeah, absolutely. And without giving any organisation or individual specifics, of course, do you sort of maybe have some examples where you've maybe seen or heard this is maybe done in the wrong way, and maybe what lessons were learned from that?
I can talk about, older businesses that have been around for a lot longer, that may be a little bit set in their ways, and I've experienced, the old adage. Unfortunately, I'll quite openly talk about this. My family or some of my family members have been quite set in their ways. Mental health wasn't, because you couldn't see it, wasn't a thing. It's not an illness. It's not an actual issue. It's just get on with it. Or the old adage that a lot of people hate is just man up. So and unfortunately there were businesses that like to portray the idea that they have this whole mental health ethos for people, but because they're like, it's a tick box exercise, and it is very uniform in what they offer. So when you did come down to it, you did need it, it wasn't there. And I think there is a shift now from businesses, especially in the last few years, that you can't just say you have a mental health strategy. You can't just offer a phone line, to offer a faceless person, there needs to be even the likes of mental health first aiders. So I think things are getting better across the board, but yeah, and time's gone by with different businesses, especially in maybe more high octane sectors, whether that be finance or defence. There was definitely the sort of just suck it up or man up in that aspect, which didn't work, and a lot of people did leave, and inevitably leave the business because they don't feel careful.
Yeah, absolutely. And Sarah?
Yeah, certainly. I suppose even services that you would expect, I suppose, to be more mindful of their staff's mental health also do occasionally not always get it right. And appreciating, the the sort of unexpectedness of COVID and the sudden impact that had on staff, and businesses had to very quickly, and services had to very quickly figure out how to support staff using very different models from what they had before. So, not physically being in the office. And certainly someone very close to me had to shield during the COVID. So they were in the shielding category for a physical health reason, but the lack of, so they almost were like just forgotten about during that period. And then when they were supported to return to work, that was not probably done with an appreciation of the mental health impact that quite a long period of shielding had on that person, and the anxiety of returning to work when, for quite a long period of time they had been told, basically don't go outside, it's so dangerous for you, and not really understanding this almost kind of traumatic impact that had on them. So yeah, it's even with services that you would think would be really mindful of that, because I think it's the context of, there's certain things that happened. COVID obviously was just a complete global, nobody knew what they were doing at that period. But so of course we weren't going to always get it right, and there's no sort of blame, but the learning from that's really important. So, how do we, because actually a lot of that support need still exists now, because a lot of organisations have not went back to those old models. There's a lot of hybrid working, there's a lot of working at home almost completely remotely. I've heard of people explaining that, they don't even know what their team look like because their meetings online, nobody switches their camera on. And it's such a simple thing. But actually, this person's been working in this job for months, and he could walk past a colleague and not know that that was them. And, so human beings are not, designed mentally to work in that way. So I think there's still lots to learn moving forward from those. But I would agree, I think things are getting better. And I think actually one of the, silver linings, if you will, of COVID is that there was a real understanding and push to the public sphere about the importance of people's mental well-being, and I think that narrative is continuing, which is positive. But yeah, certainly even agencies that you would think would be better don't always get it right, but I think what's important is that we learn from that, and we build on that moving forward.
And I think a lot, as we've already talked a little bit about, I think one of the biggest reasons that many people don't talk about mental health is this, rather antiquated sort of view of being judged negatively. How do we create an open and non-judgmental environment where, people can flourish, and where mental health, or indeed mental wealth, as you've touched on already, Jonathan, can be at the forefront?
Yeah, so I think it starts with us. I take it personally that the only way we can move forward and take away the stigma is to talk about it. The first thing I do when I openly talk about it, I'm not looking for sympathy, far from it. Although sympathy is always nice, but is always to tell my story in the hope that it resonates, and to stop people going through the same heartache and pain that I went through. It feels like there is no way out, and the only way out is to take those steps, and we've grown up. My dad was born in the 1930s, no longer with us anymore. So he was a war baby, and they went through a lot. So he didn't understand mental health. He didn't understand poor mental health, even though he probably experienced it himself. He saw it as something else. So when I had my mental health issues, it was seen as I was being, it was a weakness. It's shown as a weakness, but it's not. It's a chemical imbalance. It's something far more than we are, and we are starting to understand it. So because we are talking openly and honestly about it, just because you have poor mental health, but you have your depression, you don't feel good, doesn't mean you're not a valued member of the workforce. You bring something to the table every day, and you are cared for and you are needed, and just being open and honest and talking about that. And it's okay not to be okay. I keep saying it. When we don't have to be okay, but we need to, share stress and strain.
I'm a strong believer in human beings needing as much human interaction as they need sunlight. To have that balance, you need both sun and other humans around you.
Yeah, absolutely. And we experience that. Sorry to jump in, but we experience that. We're remote workers in our team. We've got people from mainly Manchester area, but I myself currently reside in Scotland. We've got people as far down as Gloucestershire. And then we have other colleagues that are based around the world. We've got people in Shannon and even in China. So at the end of the day, we do get on calls, we do get the cameras on. But then for the people that are locally based that we can, once a quarter, we all get into Manchester. We have a day where we spend the day in Manchester. We have a social afterwards. We go out for lunch. We spend time together. Now, those days there might be no real value of the output, but the real value is being there with your teammates, and actually having that face-to-face laugh, having that water cooler chat, sharing a biscuit, or making them eat 6 or 7 cream eggs. And then the reason why I'm saying that is my colleagues will know why they said that. That was my icebreaker for one of our meetings, was making them all eat cream eggs. But, so at the end of the day, it's a bit of fun. It resonates. And for days afterwards, there was lovely floods of messages in our Slack channels about what a great day it was, how it was great to be part of that community. And it's about building a community.
Absolutely. And we're going to enter into a part of the podcast now, which is to discuss more suicide awareness and prevention. So if any sort of the topics that we're about to discuss on the next part of this podcast are distressing or triggering in any way, then please skip ahead to the next section. We're going to have timeline details, which can be found on the screen at the bottom of the page. And there are helpline and support numbers such as the National Suicide Prevention Helpline on 0800 689 5652 or the Samaritans 116 123. And they also offer online chat, face-to-face services in some areas, or email joe@samaritans.org. You can also text SHOUT to 85258, and this is a text-based service. So Sarah, as a campaigner for suicide awareness raising and someone who has been trained to deliver several national programs for suicide safer communities, can we discuss suicide awareness raising, around signs and symptoms, and how do we recognize that someone may be struggling with these?
Yep, absolutely. So, just as you mentioned, I'm accredited trainer with LivingWorks, which is the world's leading suicide prevention and intervention training company, and they offer a number of programs that I can talk a wee bit about later on. But basically, the focus is very much empowering whole communities. It's everyone's role to be suicide aware. So signs and symptoms and indicators of suicide risks is a very important part of that. And I think that there's obviously no exhaustive list of invitations. The kind of general umbrella here is, if it's someone and you see a change in them, their behaviour, their presentation, then it's always worth being aware, suicide aware, in relation to that person. And there's a lot of myths still and stigmas that are attached to suicide, which, again, we speak a wee bit about later on. So, but yeah, I think the caveat here just is that there's no exhaustive list. But again, some indicators, changes in behaviour, so loss of interest, withdrawal, giving away possessions, for example, if you know someone who's particularly passionate about their animal, their dog, their cat, and they're suddenly querying as to whether or not you'd be in a position to take the animal, or different things can be a sign that they're, looking to try and sort of almost organise things prior to suicide. And physical indicators can be things like weight loss, lack of appearance, interest in their appearance. So again, you might find I'm made up for today, but usually I do not look like this when I'm working from home. So for me, my staff probably wouldn't, or my friends and family wouldn't notice if suddenly I didn't have makeup on. But again, if you have someone who always presents, they're always made up, or they're always clean shaven, they've always got a suit and tie on, and then suddenly they're coming into office and they're not, they seem quite unkempt, or so it's a change. It's the importance of that change in their behaviour, their loss of interest, and suddenly their appearance doesn't matter when it's someone who clearly really cared about that in the past. People will express thoughts or feelings. So again, you're looking out for hopelessness, sadness, guilt, kind of just feeling worthless, a lot of low and very self-derogatory indicators. And some of the language that you would be looking for around that would be things like, I can't take this anymore. In Scotland's a well-known phrase of, I don't want to be here anymore. Sometimes that means we do want to just be on holiday because it's very cold and wet here, but it could mean more. And again, it's not assuming the person is joking. It's not assuming that the person is just having a bit of banter. If you then have noticed other things, if you've noticed that someone is getting quite withdrawn, not looking after themselves, then they're also saying, oh, I just wish I wasn't here. Then you're kind of putting those things together, and that would lead you to be again, if you think suicide, then you'd be putting those joining those dots up a wee bit. You would also, though, be looking for kind of situations. So loss is always a big one. Loss of friends, family members, close, colleagues, bereavements that are close to that person, pets as well. Suicide or attempted suicide by family members, friends, are also public figures. So there are trends in suicides. Unfortunately, if someone who's quite high profile suicide, you do unfortunately can get a wave or a cluster of suicides off of that. And it's a grief reaction, obviously. It's not trendy. It's not, they're just, it's a grief response. Relationship and family problems, housing problems, financial issues, which obviously in the current climate is a massive issue for people with the cost of living crisis in the economy. Job-related stress is a big one. Bullying, abuse, neglect, loneliness, all these kind of things that, again, it's, challenging current events. Looking out for things, signs and symptoms around, is somebody drinking more? Are they indicating that they're using drugs? Really, what you're looking for in this is, it's about pain. Suicide is about pain, and it's about someone wanting to stop that pain. But the human desire to live often, far outweighs any desire to die. But the person still has pain in that moment. So what you will look for is signs that that pain is either being masked, numbed, avoided, or is causing such an impact on that person that their mood and behaviour is changing. So that's kind of the cluster of things that you're sort of wanting to be mindful of, and also just, I suppose, again, really just not forgetting that suicide is there and can be there, and joining those dots would sort of lead you to that thought process of, is this person possibly having thoughts of suicide? So hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, no, thank you. Appreciate you sharing. And Jonathan, in terms of other sort of mental health illnesses and things that may stop a person from functioning or working, for example, how do we spot changes in colleagues' mental health? From a workplace perspective, what might look like, again, your warning signs.
So again, Sarah has, pretty much said there's a lot of the key figures there that you're going to spot. Did they turn up? Are they turn up late to meetings, excessively late to meetings? Are they forgetting meetings? do they seem that bothered about the work that they're doing? Whereas before they might have been interested in, you approach them about it, or do they just seem nonchalant about the work and it's, I'll get it done at some point? How are they with their colleagues? Joe's been such a lovely person, is always polite. Now he's a little bit offensive to people. How are they reacting to people? How are they acting? What again? Look out for the triggers that they're saying. Personally, myself, speaking from experience, I felt worthless. I felt I wasn't good enough, and a lot of what Sarah was saying, the key indicators, resonated with me. So I was unkept. I didn't take pride in my appearance. My clothes were usually dirty and smelly. I was drinking. Right? I was taking drugs every night. To numb the pain of being alive, really. And speaking from experience, start to look at that, ask them, if you start to feel that the person you're working with, whether it's over a call or whether it's in day to day, I know, like we just discussed, we don't really see people day to day, but if you start to pick up that smell of alcohol, which isn't just they've had a pint at lunch, which might be okay, it's an underlying, they've been heavily drinking, and there's nothing wrong with asking if they're okay. I think this is the bit that everyone's scared they're going to offend somebody by saying, is everything all right? Are you okay? Do you want to talk about stuff? The person might get offended because they don't want to open up to you, and they might be a little bit standoffish, but you're doing, that it might be what they need to hear. It's not, I have approached someone and asked them if they're okay, and they were just having a rough time. They weren't suicidal, but they were having a rough time, but they were really grateful after the fact that I'd approached them. So, as I've said, it's a community thing. We have it upon us to look out for each other. CyberConnect's a community, DTX is a community, and we should all start to look out for each other. And asking that question is not to be offensive, it's not to think anything less, it's to let them know that you care and that you're there to listen to whatever they want to say and not judge.
100%.
And do either of you feel that perhaps there's additional sort of physical symptoms that perhaps may crop up? Individuals that perhaps are suffering with alopecia, psoriasis, or clear eating disorder, for instance.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, the physical manifestation of stress and pain can come out in people in lots of different ways, because stress effectively does attack your immune system, and it can trigger autoimmune responses. So if someone has underlying issues around things like, like alopecia, dermatitis, eczema, migraines as well is another one, stomach issues as well. It's very common for people with anxiety and stress to struggle with digestive issues, because our bodies and our minds are absolutely interconnected. And if one part of our body's stressed, the rest of it tends to join in, because it's not managing as quite as well. And again, obviously, there's the impact if people are utilising things like drugs, alcohol, not eating well, not exercising, then obviously their physical health can start to, be affected by that as well. So yeah, and things like, I know you mentioned eating disorders. I mean, they are a mental disorder in their own sort of right, but certainly the kind of crux of an eating disorder often centres around control. And when people feel they lack control in other aspects of their life, and that can trigger an eating disorder. So if someone is so stressed and their circumstances are causing them so much difficulty, the only thing they control is what they're eating, then absolutely that can be a sign. As I said, there's definite links, and research has been undertaken around this trend that we see, particularly in men, actually, where they have some sort of physical health appointment 6 months, usually within a 6-month window prior to a suicide. And so they're researching that now to kind of try and get understanding, is that actually the appointment is to talk about, I have suicidal thoughts and I don't know what to do. And then by the time the appointment comes up, it's like, oh, actually, my stomach hurts. Or is there an indication there where someone has got physical symptoms to the point where they're seeking advice from a medical professional, but actually there's an underlying mental health reason as to why that person is experiencing that. I've found in my own staff, a lot of stress-related sicknesses often start out with either migraine or stomach issues or something more physical, and because it can be the first sign to that person that they're struggling with their stress levels. So absolutely, yeah, physical health can be a real sign of that. I think as well, also just to touch on what Jonathan said there around somebody may not appreciate being asked, an aggressive response can still be an invitation. So if someone suddenly is kind of pushing people away, being more disgruntled, not as, cheery, or maybe not as helpful, or as, and it could just be that they're very stressed at work and they don't have time, and which is, absolutely understandable. But again, that kind of pushing away of people can also be what we would call an invitation that something's not right. And they may not answer the question, but the fact that you've asked, if they do, can always be enough that the person might come back round and say, actually, how you asked me the other day, I'm not actually doing too well, So it's just an important kind of note on that point.
The only thing I was going to say is, with regards to myself being neurodiverse, is again, I think it still stands. I'm autistic with neurodiverse ADHD. Sorry, so I have ways I do things, but then I think about things after the fact, and I am managing that. So for me, it was sleepless nights, replaying certain scenarios, getting down to probably an hour to 45 minutes sleep a night, which also there's a reason why sleep deprivation is used as a torture, has been used as a torture. So there are no two neurodiverse people are the same. So at the end of the day, it does pick up if you start to see a difference in how that individual has been or usually acts, then start to take note and look for, as Sarah calls them, these invitations.
In terms of look, many people have got their own views and opinions, most of them misguided and assumptive. Would you be kind enough to share some of the myths and misconceptions about suicide and suicidal thoughts? And maybe Jonathan first and then followed by Sarah.
I've actually had this with somebody, a friend of mine, who unfortunately lost a friend of theirs. And the first reaction was, it's selfish. That how could they do this to other people? And I think that's probably one of the misguided things, is that the person who is going through this pain and this torment is thinking of other people. Their sole solution and their thinking is to take that they're a nuisance, that they're a burden. That what they're going through, people have said, I wish you could just, get on, don't, you've got so much to live for, man up, those statements. I'm using this in the context of myself. That the only way you can stop that and allow people to get on with their lives is to take that yourself out of the solution. And a lot of people who are sat on the other side, sadly, after this has happened, are very angry at that person, but they don't understand the chemical setup of the brain and what that person, they feel that is the only solution to that problem. They don't see any other way out, and I think that's a very misguided concept and that people believe.
Yep, I would agree with that, absolutely. So, and certainly, I suppose, just on the back of that, the grief of loss of a suicide is actually, it's a very different grief response that people have. And I wouldn't know in terms of, obviously this is quite a wide reaching podcast, but certainly many areas will likely have some sort of specific bereavement support for families and loved ones affected by suicide. So certainly in our area we have a specialised grief bereavement service for those who have been lost to suicide, because the sort of therapeutic intervention around that grief is a bit different, because it usually starts with a lot of anger and also a lot of guilt. And that's often why people react that way, because they think, why didn't I see the signs? Why didn't I? So there's a lot of guilt, related to that grief as well, which is very difficult for people to sort of process and move through. But in terms of the wider myths around suicide, some of the ones that in particular I do want to take time to showcase is, first of all, some people still believe that suicide's illegal. It's not. It's that it used to be. It definitely used to be, but it's not legal. And you also don't have to have a mental illness. You don't have to be mentally unwell to suicide. And actually, a lot of people are not recorded to have a mental illness or disorder diagnosed prior to a suicide event. So just because someone might not have a diagnosis of depression, anxiety, or schizophrenia, bipolar, all these things, it doesn't mean that they're not at risk of suicide. People also believe that only certain groups in society are at risk of suicide, and yes, certainly there are demographics where we see higher rates of suicide, but that doesn't mean that people not within those demographics aren't at risk. And sometimes people do get caught up in statistics around, high risk groups and urban comments. But actually, we've moved away from that narrative, importantly, because the minute you sort of shoebox people into, like, these are the groups that are at risk, then anyone not within that group could be missed, because people aren't then thinking suicide first. So, and actually the NHS used to base their risk assessment on those predetermining factors. So, is it a male? Is he between this age? Is there a history of drugs, alcohol? Is there previous suicide behaviour? And these can be indicators of a higher risk, but they found that what was happening was people that were not ticking these boxes literally were not then being asked, have you thought about suicide, or are you thinking about suicide? And opportunities were being missed. So we've, as an organisation, that's been moved away from that. So I think it's really important to highlight that one. More people actually die by suicide across the globe than in armed conflict. So it's every 40 seconds in the world somebody suicides. It's a public health issue. And about 3% of people worldwide will think about suicide every week. That's the statistic. So the idea that it's a fringe group, or it's only certain people, or it won't be the person sitting next to me, we need to get away from those misconceptions around suicide. And the most important one that I do want to definitely get the message out around today is that asking someone if they are having thoughts of suicide will not put the thought in their head. There is a real misconception that, what if I ask this person, are they thinking about killing themselves? Are they thinking about ending their life? And they weren't. But then I've said that, and they think, oh, that's a great idea. Like, I'll go, right. There is no research, no evidence, and this is based on suicide survivors that this research is based on. Not one person has ever said, I wasn't thinking about it until someone asked me. And actually, almost all suicide survivors will say, I was desperate for someone to ask me, because I really needed to talk about it, and I was so frightened, and nobody ever asked the question. The worst case scenario will be that the person will say, no, I'm not thinking about suicide. And they might be a wee bit offended. They might be taken aback by that question. But then I do think, well, what's led to that question? That person must be indicating through their invitations that something is really wrong. You've asked them, are you thinking about suicide? They've said, no, I'm not. No, why would you think that? It then also allows you to say, well, actually, you've not been yourself at work. All these examples, all these invitations that we've just talked about, you would relay them back to the person. I'm actually really worried about you. That's why I've asked, because you're sounding really hopeless. Your self-esteem seems really low. I was just really worried that was maybe something on your mind. I'm delighted to hear it's not. I'm so thankful that it's not. But let's talk about what else is going on for you then. And the conversation will move on. But people still have this belief that if they ask someone, they might plant that seed. And it can absolutely assure everyone that will never happen. Most people are aware that suicide exists. Almost all adults, certainly living in our societies, are aware that suicide is there. So you're not, giving someone any sort of inspiration or new information. And I think that's the most important misconception, that I do want to try and get that message out, because ultimately the best way to make our community suicide safer is for more people to have the confidence and courage to ask other people if they are thinking about suicide, because the vast majority of people with suicidal thoughts want to live, and they're trying to have that conversation, and that's why they're sending out these invitations. That's why we call them invitations, because they're inviting that question. So if that's how we think about it, and we ask the question, and And, the person might say yes, and then you can then have an honest and frank conversation about, right, well, that's really concerning. So where do we go from here? How do we get you some help for that? And then, you would look to, if it's work, your policy, if it's a friend, you'd have that conversation and link them into a more appropriate person to help them with that longer term. So that for me, I think, is a real myth that still exists.
Well, we appreciate you sharing them, Sarah, and some sobering statistics that you've shared as well, really. But no, thank you for sharing that with us.
And Jonathan, cybersecurity, of course, is an extremely high pressure industry with significant reputational financial stakes. Often we see individuals working long, exhausting working hours, being faced with challenges from constant evolving and emerging threats. And we're also seeing the phrase such as alert fatigue and burnout being used more often, especially in the last sort of 6 to 12 months, which ultimately makes mental health and well-being more pertinent in areas of focus, especially obviously technology and cybersecurity. So briefly, could you share with us some of the biggest stresses that cybersecurity professionals face?
Yeah, absolutely. So, at the moment there is I was just having this discussion the other day, and cyber is now one of the main pillars of any business, as we've seen over the last, definitely since lockdown, since GDPR became a thing, since data started to have a value on it, we now need to protect that asset. It's probably worth more than the data, and our customer data is probably worth more than the actual stuff that we're selling generally, to us financially as a loss. So we need to protect that. So, and now what is GDPR? What is PII data? Everything pretty much. You can literally, target people. So splitting that out is becoming even more increasingly difficult. So the easiest thing to do is to make everything as important. And with that comes the attacks, the current state that we're in under, with the whole Russia and Ukraine, that opened us up to targets from bad foreign actors. The general ethos now, everything is online, and everybody wants to get into the game of attacking. The kudos of finding backdoors into different businesses. It's a 24/7, 365 business protecting companies. And with that comes the human element, and that is, more and more alerts, more and more attacks, more and more 24/7, 365, and with budget constraints, economic situation of the UK and the world globally means that maybe headcount is frozen in a lot of places in a lot of different areas. So we're expecting the same output with a smaller and/or restricted headcount. So it's starting to impact us greatly, and I say us as a community. Businesses are now looking to see how they can, leverage better security, and by that, and that's from MSSPs, from service providers, from security service providers, whoever that be, to lift the weight off. We've seen this in technology before in the past, when it was with infrastructure, bringing in different infrastructure as a service, and now we're starting to see cyber as a service from other vendors to try and help businesses. It's going to get harder, I would probably say, before it gets better, unfortunately. But and that's why we're having these discussions to let people know that they're not alone, and to see how we can use technology to help our colleagues and move forward.
And are there any other ways organisations perhaps can address work-life balance within cybersecurity?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's many things, and one of the main things about being in cyber is reward and recognition. I would probably say, recognizing the wins, recognizing the value that our colleagues are bringing, and also it's amazing how far it goes to be rewarded for something you do. And we do that with our colleagues, and it's very easy in our day-to-day jobs and life not to reward people and tell them they're doing a good job and show them that they're a valued member of staff and really appreciated. We see it across all different divisions. Sales, for example, people get a salesperson of the year, so why can't we have the cybersecurity professional of the year or quarter? And little things like that help. rewarding with days off. You know, we've already said about mental health days. So, and this isn't an official JR stance, but I'm a true believer in what the business will get more out of you than you'll get out of the business. You know, yes, we get paid a salary, but we're here to provide a service and to be the best versions of ourselves while we do that. So that's where, as a manager, as a C-suite, as down, that's where we need to look after our staff. We have to look after from the ground up, from starting out, and show that it's okay to say, I need a bit of time here, and I need to walk away, I need to take a step away, I need a different view on life and work just now, and be able to have that door to come back. It's not forever. And if you start to build that, one, you'll keep your staff, and two, you'll start to feel like that true community, and you'll feel like you are a family. And that's what we should be building. We should be building families that grow together, and push each other forward, you know.
So, Jonathan, we've had conversations with some of our other guests about unconscious bias, for instance, but how does the fear of failure impact cybersecurity professionals, especially senior leaders?
Yeah, no, that's really, really good. You know, everyone has that sort of imposter syndrome. I think it happens. I've spoken to many colleagues in cyber, some at very, very senior levels, and there is always that underlying imposter syndrome. Cyber is a very unique industry to work in. It's ever evolving. It's never stagnant. Every day, something new, something different, a different way. As an architect, if I build something, a cybersecurity architect, the whole idea is there is somebody out there that wants to find a way to get into that. And I get imposter syndrome, you know, with something I deliver. Have I delivered something secure enough? Am I 100% sure? I'm never 100% sure that it's going to be the most secure, but it's as secure as I can make it. And C-suite levels as well, they've got so much to go on, budget constraints, you know, doing right to get the right people involved. It's just the nature of the beast, unfortunately. But again, and I know I'm waxing on about it, that's where we support each other, and that's where we tell each other. Everyone has their strengths, everyone has their weaknesses. There's nobody that can do 100%, and it's telling people how you can lean on your team to get the best out.
And we've seen over the last sort of 4 or 5 years a huge shift in working conditions, with individuals working from home, fully remote, hybrid, of course. So I'll be curious to gain your perspective in terms of has and how does remote working affect cybersecurity associates in terms of their mental health, Jonathan?
Massively, you know, massively. And I don't think it's just cybersecurity, but speaking on behalf of the cybersecurity community, I think it does massively, you know. There is all various different peoples, you know, being on the spectrum myself. Some days I don't want to see or speak to anyone. I want to sit quite happily in my onesie. There's an image for all the listeners, and get on with my day. But there is something, you know, I think Sarah knows that from previous discussions that I've got to a point from working from home where I've spent 4 or 5 days and I've not seen another human being. You know, I've literally sat in meetings and I've done work and I've not even left the house. It's very easy to order a Just Eat or to order, you know, to eat rubbish from the kitchen. And that impacts, as you said yourself, Warren, as humans, we need to have other human interaction, not over a Teams call, not over a video call, but actual physical human interaction. Whether it's getting a cuddle off your mate or just having banter with some people at the gym, whatever it is, we need that. So it's really impacted the way we work. It's really impacted how people are. And that's why, you know, the likes of DTX Manchester are all getting into, you know, for a couple of days walking around DTX Manchester, seeing other security professionals, talking to people, going to the bits and pieces that might be on afterwards, and also having days in the office, whether that be fun days in the office where you do silly games, or whether that be actual lunch and learns, or whatever it might be. A really, really, really important, one, to our mental health, and two, to us building that community together.
So as we've discussed throughout this episode, you know, it's essential that community and social networking, they're critical when it comes to mental health and well-being support. So Sarah, firstly, I'll be curious to gain your perspective in terms of how do events such as DTX London and DTX Manchester help foster community and networking across the important topics in areas, of course, of technology and cybersecurity?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I mean, certainly I haven't been to one yet, and I'm very excited to be speaking at DTX Manchester this year. how I've ended up there, I don't really know, but I'm very excited to be going. But certainly, and obviously in my working life, I have attended similar conferences and networking opportunities within health and social care and different things. And all of these events, I think, absolutely support that community aspect of your sector. So there is something so crucial in sitting down with someone you've never met who's doing a similar role somewhere else that you don't do, and hearing them complain about the same things, the same issues that you have. And there's an element of, it's not just my organization, it's not just my, team or area or service that's having this difficulty, but there's also something incredibly valuable then in hearing other people say, well, this is how we get round this problem. This is what my service has done, and that's worked really well. This is how we've tackled this particular issue. And I would definitely echo that the impact of hybrid and working from home full time is having a massive impact on individuals who are working's mental well-being. Some of that is positive because people are able to do things like balance their work-life commitments. They might be carers for people. They might have, other commitments that actually not having that commute or having some flexibility is really positive for. But absolutely, there is an element of personal responsibility there. But I think large-scale community network events can help you get some ideas around that, and it just bridges that gap with human to human connection. That's not necessarily somebody that's in your own service, because sometimes you have to maybe be careful who you're complaining to in your own service, but definitely there's an aspect of just this isn't just me, and you immediately feel connected to that experience, whether it's because you are both stressing that services are being cut, or you're both stressing because of some sort of cyber issue that I would have no knowledge of, not being in cyber. But there's something in that connection that's really important. So
No, that's brilliant. And from my experience and Jay's experience attending events such as DTX, it's a great opportunity to connect with other communities and special interest groups, for instance, and understand some of the challenges, like you said, that they're facing, but also the successes. And Jonathan, you've obviously spoken at events such as this, and you're, of course, going to be speaking this year. What's brought you back? Why do you keep returning to DTX, and why is it important for communities?
So yeah, thank you, Warren. Yeah, so I spoke at DTX Manchester last year and chaired a panel, and it was a great topic of discussion. We actually didn't have enough time, I felt, and then again was asked to go to DTX London to do, and then ended up being drafted onto the main stage. Again, a really, really invaluable experience. Met some like-minded people from all different backgrounds, made some really good connections. You get to see the latest stuff from vendors as well, so you get to have a chat. As much as I'm sorry to all the vendors that might be listening here, as much as we detest their mail shots that they send to us, we love their freebies. Nothing like a good pair of free socks to make you happy on a cold, wet Wednesday in Manchester. But you get to see the latest in technology, whether you need it or not, but you get to understand what is happening out there. So, like I've said to you, cyber is something that's ever evolving. The threats are evolving, but so's the technologies that we're using. So you really get to spend 2 days looking at the technologies, touching, feeling, and asking questions about it. You get to go and listen to very, very interesting talks, whether it be soft skill talks around about mental health and neurodiversity, for example, or whether it be on the main stage. I think it was Darren Brown last year. That was a very interesting talk. So it just, for me, it's a good way of getting out, getting amongst the community, meeting like-minded folk like yourselves, and really starting to see what's happening out there outside of your own little work bubble, and making really good connections as well. So that's why I'm back.
I think it facilitates diversity of thought as well. All these brilliant minds in the same room, same building. You can certainly feel the energy there. And setting DTX aside, Sarah, could you share with us some insights or other initiatives, programs, non-profits or events that help organisations and individuals raise both an understanding and awareness of mental health?
Yeah, absolutely. So this obviously, again, there will be local initiatives and local, support organisations. So there is definitely an element for particularly employers if they feel they're struggling to know where to go for some advice. Google is a wonderful thing. Other search engines are available, but but in terms of a kind of from a UK perspective, Britain's actually, who we've mentioned before, really help, really important and well-known helpline. But they also do offer workplace training on mental health awareness. They have a programme called Wellbeing in the Workplace, which helps managers and teams look at their culture of support and build upon that. Mind UK as well also offers employer-focused mental health training. They have lots of online toolkits. I use them quite a lot in my own work. They also have quite good assessment tools for managers. So looking at workplace stress levels, how do you actually assess that if you've never been asked to do that before? England also has the mental health first aid, which trains individuals to kind of recognise signs and symptoms. It's like first aid for physical health, so that it's very kind of short, sharp, literally, do we get the person away from that immediate risk, and then they support them to move into a longer term support service. That's not dissimilar to one of the trainings that Living Works trainers can offer, so called Safe Talk. So again, if people are encouraged to think about, and I appreciate there's financial costs to some of the training, but if they are feeling like this is a good investment, then the Living Works UK site can link organisations into the local trainers in their area, and they can deliver a different, there's a whole range of training available depending on what the organisation needs. But they also have a free online resource that's about 30 minutes long that people can watch just to help them recognise some basic signs and symptoms. Again, that's much more suicide focused than generic mental health. So that's some of the kind of wider, more like national programs that are available. But I think as well, organisations particularly can pick up on some of the key dates across the year. So October the 10th is World Mental Health Day, which is a global event that organisations can participate in, and there's always lots of resources and things that start to come out from charities and global organisations that a lot of this is free. And it can be used throughout the year. Time to Talk Day is actually in February. I don't have the date, sorry, but it might have passed, but it encourages open conversations about mental health at work. September is National Suicide Prevention Month. A month's quite a lot for focusing on suicide, but there's a kind of day and a week within September that, again, organisations can kind of focus on. That's actually a global initiative, so that's supported by like the World Health Organization and different global events. So that's why it is a full month, because obviously it's to allow for all these different organisations to put out their resources. But September is certainly the time if you want to link in with your HR, whether you've got a communications department or a wellbeing department or a HR department, linking in with these key dates through the year, it can give you a bit of a timetable. It's also important not to only focus on those days, certainly, and to make sure it's a constant conversation, but it would give you, a kind of framework to look at how, when do we review, is things working well, and using that as a bit of a framework. But I would really encourage organisations and employers and individuals to certainly look at their local area and their local initiatives, because there's a wealth of organisations and charities out there that their remit is to help support mental health and support mental health in the workplace. There's lots of digital toolkits and helpline numbers and professional support access and things. So certainly, look local first, but there's lots of wider national and ultimately global organisations that have lots of resources available for employers as well.
I appreciate you sharing. And for our audience, we'll put all of the details and contact information for all of those initiatives and events that you mentioned in the bio and description.
And as we come to the sort of back end of the episode, Jonathan, what maybe some sort of, what key piece of advice would you give to aspiring cybersecurity professionals who want to develop their careers? Is there maybe to both junior and senior, really? Be interested to know your thoughts.
Yeah, so cyber is a very unique enterprise. There is many different roles. There's many very different pathways within cyber, Jay, as you know. So it's not as it's not as straightforward as just being one particular thing. So for up and comers that want to get into cybersecurity, make sure you don't have to go to college nowadays, which is quite good. You don't have to have a degree in cybersecurity. Obviously, it all helps. It all makes you stand out from the crowd. Look at Caps Lock, for example, if you want to go and get your accreditation. The guys at Caps Lock are doing amazing things over there. There's also Bridewell as well, who offers some really good classes and online stuff. So bridewell.com, have a look at those guys starting out, and then look at the different areas of cyber. So look at where you want to go, where you are just now, what specifically gets you interested. Is it the threat and detect? Is it pen testing? There is multiple. Is it architecture? There's so much out there that you can choose from. So decide on what interests you, where you would like to go, and then reach out to people, follow people on LinkedIn and other areas that is where you want to go, and ask them. We are an open community. Send them messages, ask them for guidance. I as well will update my LinkedIn, so anyone can reach out to me. And I suppose that's really have an idea on where you want to go and where you see yourself. Unfortunately, I always laugh at this one. It's still a 5-year, 10-year plan. Where do you want to see yourself? And for me, it's don't rush, take your time. Experience is king, understanding, it's an ever evolving landscape. Get in, sit tight for a good few years, and then work on that pathway through, because you'll become invaluable. Also, the only thing I would say generally, it's always been my outlook on cyber security, is we used to be somewhere that would stop businesses. We would stop businesses from moving forward because the old computer says no, cybersecurity say no. We can't do that anymore. We need to be at the forefront of our business journey, so we need to be more approachable. So 100% now we need to be the smiling face of cybersecurity. We need to enable the business to move forward in a secure and controlled manner, not stop them at the last hurdle when they want to go live with the product. And that's it, really.
No, that's great. And very briefly, Jonathan, something that we've not spoke about in this session, which is a shocking one, AI. What do you feel the impact is going to be in terms of a positive or negative one for cybersecurity as a whole, but in particular, the important topics that we've discussed today?
So, AI is we're in an unusual position. It's going to be a blessing. It's going to be a curse as well for cybersecurity, because, with threats, it's ever evolving. It's rewriting itself. It's progressive. It is literally any threat that comes in. If it can't find a way, it will rewrite it and try it in a different way. So, that's why we're getting burnout from our colleagues. Because things are changing, the landscape's changing daily. But with that, we can start to see vendors using AI to process vast amounts of data to start to work out where threats are coming from. That takes the onus off us as cybersecurity professionals to get that data. So that's really, really good. You also see the likes of ThreatLocker that are anti-AI, who are actually just stopping if they can't work out what it's from and where it's going from. Then they will stop at endpoint detection. So they will stop anything coming from anything that could be AI. So it's an exciting time. I think we're in an unusual place for AI, but being in cyber, I think we're always going to be needed. I don't think there is ever a point where AI would take over cyber professionals' roles completely. I think that's quite a unique position to be in. I see a lot of it from the threat detection point, and also from looking at anomalies and pattern recognition. I see that being nothing but beneficial to us, our mental health, our burnout, and hopefully, this is the heart of it, is to get businesses to be able to loosen those purse strings to go out and buy products that do enable that, and we can start to see that grow within the workplace.
Yeah, absolutely, Jonathan. Thank you. And look, it's been an incredibly important episode, I think, and we're extremely grateful to both of you for your openness and and beyond valuable insights. Just to sort of finish off, for our listeners who want to stay connected and obviously beyond the episode, what does the future hold for you both, and where else can they reach you?
So yeah, thank you very much, and I have really thoroughly enjoyed being able to bring my training, my experience into a platform that I'd never envisioned being able to come on and speak about. So for me, moving forward, continuing very committedly to try and break down that mental health stigma in the workplace. I think this whole experience has opened me up to thinking about the high pressure sectors like cybersecurity, where, there's maybe not that conversation is happening quite as often. Just looking to keep advocating for the mental health of workers, and especially environments where mental health is not prioritised or recognised, and really making employers understand not just the financial implications of not supporting their staff, but the productivity, the reasons why it would benefit them go far beyond just that individual staff member's mental health, whilst that should be the priority. But sometimes on a grander scheme, you have to help people understand the wider importance of that. But for me, obviously, I'll just continue showing up at my job, managing my teams, and I'm certainly looking to try and continue to scale up the mental health initiatives in my own organisation. We've very sadly lost a staff member to suicide just this year. So it's not something that, even organisations that are really pushing the mental health strategies in the workplace are can avoid all the time. So for us, it's constant review, constant growth, and just keep pushing for that culture where mental wealth is absolutely integrated into what we do.
Yeah, and from my point of view, firstly, I'd like to thank Sarah for coming on, and it was really some of the information. Obviously, I don't know everything I like to think I do, so it was really interesting and insightful, and really helps me feel like I'm trying to do the right thing by talk openly and honestly. And I'd like to thank both yourselves, Warren and Jay, for taking time and inviting myself onto this podcast as well. Again, to get that message out there. So thank you very much to both of you for giving me this platform to talk on. From myself, I will update my LinkedIn, and please, to anyone that can find it, feel free to send me messages on Jonathan Marnoch 69@gmail.com, as well as my email address. Happily take people who might want to send me any emails there to reach out to me, even if it's just to talk, and especially about the mental health aspect. I always check my emails. So if there's somebody that wants to have a chat about anything they've heard today on a private level, happily reach out to them there. I'm going to be doing some talks at DTX. It is a busy time for us at Jaguar Land Rover, as many of the people might have seen with the new launch of Jaguar, which has been exceptional, and the launch of some of our new Land Rover ranges, especially around our electrification vehicles. So it's a really, really interesting time. It's time to knuckle down, keep working with my team, keep talking, and being open and honest, and try to build this community up, and be more open about mental health on all aspects. But yeah, that's me. Keep my head down and keep going to the gym.
Well, we'll certainly look forward to that LinkedIn update, Jonathan, and we'll be keeping an eye on that at some point. And look forward to seeing you at DTX again. Obviously, that's where we met the first time last year. So yeah, looking forward to re-engaging with you. Look, both of you, Jonathan, Sarah, thank you so much to both of you. The community and all our listeners will have found a huge amount of value in today's session, I'm sure. To continue the discussion, for more sustained engagement, as always, we invite you to join the Secure CyberConnect community. We offer a range of collaborative solutions across tech and security professionals at no cost. Expansive community access, mutual mentoring, online networking sessions, exclusive interviews such as this, panel discussions and masterclasses to come in 2025. To learn more and gain access to the community and any of our initiatives, please visit secure-recruitment.com/cyber-connect/. Thank you very much, everybody.
If you're enjoying today's session, please follow and rate on Spotify. Thank you.